morning. It's good to have you with us this morning as we begin our series of lessons on the doctrine of hermeneutics, how to interpret the Bible. And the first 6 lessons have to do with the background and the authority of the Word of God. And today, with lesson 1, we want to cover the 3 ideas of revelation, inspiration, and inerrancy. We want to define those for you and give you the information about what the Word of God has to say about these very important ideas. So let's begin then. Just by way of introduction, we can say God has revealed Himself in His creation and to His creation. The revelation has one purpose, and I'm sure you're aware of this, and that revelation of God is about the glory of His name. In accordance with His saving purpose, He has preserved for us in the Bible the inspired inerrant Word, the written record of the revelation of His person and work. He's given us the written Word that testifies then, of course, to the living Word. Jesus is the living Word of God, and the Bible testifies to Him, and it's in His face then that we see the glory of God. That's what God is all about. So the Bible really is a precious gift from the living God to men, to us, so that we can know Him. So this lesson, as I mentioned, is going to cover the doctrines of revelation, inspiration, and inerrancy. We'll define these terms, and we're also going to see how God's supernatural power undergirds all 3 of these great doctrines, how it undergirds these doctrines. So let's begin with then the doctrine of revelation. The Greek word, as we define this idea, the Greek word for revelation is apocalypsis and means basically to make fully known or to reveal. It's the word that defines the last book of our Bible, the revelation of Jesus Christ, to make Him fully known. So God, for His own glory, has created with the purpose of revealing to us, dear people, the beauty of His character. That's what God's all about, setting Himself on display. And God has taken the initiative then to reveal Himself to His creation. And there's 2 primary ways He has done this. The first we call general revelation, and we're going to talk about both of these ideas. The second way is through special revelation, and we're going to define that as well. Let's begin with the idea of general revelation. General revelation is the manifestation of certain attributes of God's character through the creation, through what He has made. And this, we would say this revelation then is universal in scope. It touches all people born on the planet at all times in every corner of the globe. And it's a clear revelation about God made evident by God to each individual. We see that in Psalm 19, verses 1 through 6, where God tells us through the psalmist, the heavens are telling the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of His hands. That the creation is making an announcement to all people about who God is. And we also see it in Romans 1, 19, 18 through 20, really. And Paul tells us that which is known about God is evident within all men, within all people. For God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power and divine nature have been, Paul says, clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, the creation, so that all men are without excuse in understanding these truths God has revealed to every person through what He has made. Now, the content of this revelation is, like we said, certain aspects of the character of God. The following attributes are revealed from different texts, like what we just read. We talked about His invisible attributes, which include His eternal power and His divine nature, things like His wisdom and goodness, and that are seen in how He has put the universe together. Acts 14:17 speaks about His providential control of all things, His of nature. Again, his goodness is revealed. And then, of course, the fact that he's alive. He's a living God. His living existence is set forth in the creation. And so there's a wonderful revelation by God in what he has made to us. This would lend credibility. I don't know how many of you heard of the cosmological argument to prove the existence of God. And that simply means that that which is created demands a creator. In other words, what has been caused has an uncaused cause, if you will. God's the one who shines the light on himself by what has been made, because it couldn't exist without his bringing it into being, the cosmological argument for his existence. General revelation, then, is the basis for, we would say, the just condemnation of all men, because it says in that text we read in Romans that they suppress this revelation of God, this truth about God, the truth revealed to them in the creation. They suppress that in their unrighteousness. And you can read in Romans 1:18 through 32 that that suppression of the truth that's clearly revealed to them in the creation leads to leads to the worship of idols, to worshiping and serving the creature rather than the creator, because they're dead in sin. And so that general revelation is rejected by men. Now we come to special revelation. Special revelation, unlike general revelation, which is available to all men through the creation that God has made, is direct communication by God to men concerning his person and his work. Direct communication. So, while general revelation reveals something about God, it was never designed to supply us with all that God desired to reveal to mankind concerning himself. From the beginning, therefore, God has revealed himself not only through his creation, but also through many ways, including his direct actions and words to men, through visions and dreams, through angelic messengers. These are all supernatural things. Through the prophets, filled with his Spirit, and finally, of course, through his own Son, which is a marvelous revelation of God, and that's where God's going with what he is doing, to shine the light on himself through revealing Christ to us. So, we talked about the fact that it involves direct acts and words from God concerning his person and work. There's great examples of this in the Scriptures, of this revelatory interaction. And we have God's mighty acts, for example, in history. Maybe you could think about the deliverance of Israel from Egyptian bondage. The purpose of the display of power as God delivers them from bondage in Egypt is declared for us in Exodus 9:13 through 17. And this tells us a lot about why God does all that he does. In this text in Exodus, he told Moses to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let the Hebrews go. Let my people go that they may serve me. For this time I will send all my plagues on you and your servants and your people, so that you may know, get this, that you may know that there is no one like me in all the earth. For if by now I had put forth my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, you would then have been cut off from the earth. But indeed, for this reason I have allowed you to remain, in order to show you my power and in order to proclaim my name through all the earth. That's why God does what he does, to set his name on display. And this marvelous manifestation of his power in delivering the Israelis from Egypt, or the Hebrews from Egypt, is the idea of his power being seen, so that the whole world will know that he is God. That's why he does what he does. So, along with the acts given direct declaration, according to his will and his person, In Exodus 7:27, 1 through 17, God sets forth his will in direct declaration of the Ten Commandments. He not only acts, but he speaks. He speaks directly to men. He acts in history, and then he speaks like he does here with regard to the commandments. And then in Exodus 33, remember when Moses says, "Show me your glory," God interacts with him, and he speaks to him. And you can read that in 33:17 through 34:9, where God, in a marvelous passage, directly declares to Moses his person and his beauty in response to that request. So we have his acts, we have his words. Along with his direct acts and words, he's given special revelation in many other ways, like through angelic messengers, visions and dreams, and his prophets who speak for him, filled with the Spirit. For example, you can recall when Jesus is born, how the angel Gabriel comes and gives God's message and declaration to Mary about Jesus, and Zacharias about John, and the messenger is the angel Gabriel, stands in the very presence of God. In Daniel, the book of Daniel, we have significant communication from God in the form of dreams and visions. You all are probably familiar with what happens in the book of Daniel and how God uses those dreams to communicate truth about his person and work. Jeremiah is a typical prophet of God speaking for God. We're told in Jeremiah 1:7, "All that I command you," God says to him, "all that I command you, you shall speak." So God's superintending over Jeremiah. And in 1:9, "Behold, I have put my words in your mouth." So special revelation through the prophets, through words now and acts and angelic beings and his prophets, different ways. However, the greatest and most significant special revelation of God to men was in the sending of his Son into the world. John 1:18, we read, "No one has seen God at any time. The only begotten God, who is in the bosom of the Father, he has explained him. He has exegeted him. He's led forth the meaning of God by his very presence, his words and works." Paul proclaims in Colossians 1:15 through 17, excuse me, that he, Jesus, is the image of the invisible God. How do we see God? Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. The writer of Hebrews says in Hebrews 1:1 through 3, that he, Jesus, is the radiance of his glory, the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. He is the one, Paul says in 2 Corinthians, it's in his face, the face of Jesus, we see the very glory of God in the gospel as it's proclaimed. And Jesus, of course, was with God from all eternity. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And you remember in John 14:9, when Philip asked to see the Father, what does Jesus say? He says, "Philip, have I been with you so long, and you have not come to know me? If you have seen me, you have seen the Father." So Jesus is the great revelation of God to us, the perfect revelation of God to us. So, special revelation then involves God taking the initiative to reveal himself through his direct acts and his words, and in many other ways, culminating in the sending of his Son, the living Word, into the world.